So I'm listening to a audiobook on the Knights Templar, and it's pretty interesting. I don't know a whole lot. I know just enough to have a conversation, but I don't know dates and names and stuff like that. So I'm curious about it. But I had a thought, and this is more for record. I'm recording this for record for me, my thoughts, and I'm driving, so I can't really write these down. Interesting thought about what is the difference between man-appointed leadership and God-appointed leadership. How do those look different from each other? And because they're talking about the different popes. They're going way back, Pope Gregory and stuff. And there's been for millennia or more discussion about Christianity versus Catholicism. So, is Catholicism Christianity, or are they two separate things? And when looking at Christianity, and so Christian, a person of Christ, a Christ follower, the Christ, Jesus the Christ. So if you follow Jesus, and this is not to say that Catholics don't follow Jesus, but this is kind of just getting into some definitions so we understand each other. So a Christ follower would be a Christian, and a Catholic person, I'm not Catholic. I know, again, just enough about Catholicism to have a conversation. I've never practiced it. I do know a few, I do know some people who practice Catholicism. And so how do they look different? So you go back to the beginning, you go back to the roots, you go back to what we see. Christianity started with Christ, Jesus. Where was he first when he came to the stage, right? So he was born. Where was he born? He was born in a stable with animals, manure and straw and what have you, in a stable, in a barn, or not even a barn. I've been there. I've been to Bethlehem. I've been to the site to where Jesus was. Supposedly there's two different places where Mary had him, and then about 10 feet away where she placed him in the quote manger. So the King of Kings, Jesus, was born in a stable with filthy animals. He lived a life of humility. His dad was a carpenter. He was a carpenter. They lived in Nazareth. I've been to Nazareth. It was nothing fancy. He never lived in a castle. He never lived a life of royalty. You're talking about Jesus. And he never lived any hoity-toity, ritz and glam type of life. He didn't live in a walled-off city, in a castle, and none of that stuff. So that's kind of interesting. And then you look at his disciples and the people who were closest to him and followed him, and they were homeless. Eventually, they had homes, but they traveled so much, they were pretty much homeless, and they traveled with Jesus, and they slept in the wilderness and other people's homes, and they lived day to day, and they worried about, the day and not tomorrow. And, I'm sure they were filthy and dirty and all that stuff. And, Paul, so you look at all the people from the Bible who wrote the Gospels and wrote stories about Jesus. So this is New Testament stuff. This is Jesus stuff. This is Christian stuff. So Christianity really began with the New Testament. Christianity wasn't a thing in the Old Testament because Christ didn't exist then. Well, in the physical sense. So, but before the New Testament, the Old Testament, you had kings and, Pharisees and Sadducees and priests and rulers and all. They lived in castles and high places and all the fancy stuff. And you look at the Pope now and the Vatican and the regal, how regal it is, and royal and kingly and monarchy type. It has their own military, the Vatican Guard, all this stuff. None of that is like Jesus. Jesus, life of humility, meagerness. I'm a simple servant. I'm here to be the shepherd. I live in the field and the pastures with my sheep. That was the life of Jesus. The Pope, not so much at all. Completely 180 degrees the opposite. So it kind of goes back to my question. Who is God appointed and who is appointed by man? Is the Pope appointed by God? Or as the Pope back in 200 AD-ish, was he appointed by man? Self-appointed through legislation process. How did he come to be? How did that position come to be? Because Catholicism is rooted from Rome, Roman Catholic, Rome, the papacy. That's Catholic. So, is there a difference between Christianity and Catholicism, or is it the same? Catholicism is rooted, more in Old Testament type hierarchy. Again with kings and rulers and the hierarchy of it all. But Jesus is not at all. My king and my leader, my ruler, was nailed to a cross. That image of struggle, constant struggle, I don't see that in the Catholic Church. So it's interesting in that regard. So, is there a difference in Catholicism and Christianity? And if so, are they both jiving? Are they believing the same thing? Are they both destined? What are their destinies in what they believe? It's hard to say. I don't know. Oh well, deep thoughts for today. That is all.